Hey team, how's it going? Do you know who Adam is? Ever since I first saw him, when he was still on YouTube, I have disliked this guy. He is a smug hipster shit. When you come across a guy like this, who spouts off unconsidered opinions that conflict with your own, you must first analyze if he is just hurting your cherished beliefs, or if he's just full of shit. Well, guess what? Adam is the latter. And what makes it worse is he comes off as an authority, correcting misconceptions that people have and setting them straight. Man. Problem is, Adam lets his obvious flair for leftist causes influence and direct his shows. I would say Adam is a liar, but I don't know what he actually believes. Can't be a liar if you think it's true. If it's his own show, if that's what he believes, he has a huge problem, and we're going to examine why in this episode. I've wanted to debunk his crap for a very long time, but it just isn't my channel. He promotes political lies, not lies about art and history. Or does he? Yes, he does. And I found one right up my alley, and I can't tell you how happy it makes me to finally get to contribute to the sea of dissent against this guy and his terrible show. That's what we're doing today on STUDIO-214. Well, you know, my name is Gregory, and I like to do drawings and paintings and cooking and music and tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. Adam loves to show past historical wrongs as proof that the past wrong is still the motive for the misconceptions or law. Take, for instance, the sacking of Egypt by European powers. Did it happen? Kind of. Let's just say there are probably more than a few things outside of Egypt that the modern-day Egyptian government would rather have kept. An example is the Nefertiti bust. Maybe Borchardt was a little shady when he took it out of Egypt. Check out this video for this discussion on that whole issue. The problem is, what he is saying on screen isn't what happened at all, and those stupid references up in the corner do not, I say again, do not support his contention. There are 5 references, and not one supports his statements, or is only half true. Take, for instance, this first one.
In 1798, after Napoleon invaded Egypt, he went totally gaga for the ancient kingdoms. He brought in scholars to document their findings, and they helped themselves to whatever they wanted, even returning to France with a severed mummy head for Napoleon's wife.
Oh, Josephine will love this.
Herein lay the misdirection and half-truths. The article he cites couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, it contradicts him. It's quite a rosy picture of Napoleon. The first paragraph talks about the 160 savants he brought with him to Egypt to study and research and publish their findings. There still wasn't much known about the ancient world, and this was one of the first steps toward that goal. The article is actually quite complimentary. Here's a quote. So, his invasion was mounted by purely practical geopolitical reasons, but what is truly amazing is that he, as a general in charge of a military operation, thought it important to bring with him the contingent of civilians, the engineers, architects, naturalists, and artists, whose work there formed the basis of what would be the Description de l'Egypte. He was the first modern Egyptologist, and set up a standard for researching and preserving the ancient heritage of the Egyptians. Who knew? I did, because I looked it up. And yeah, the whole thing happened. I'm not gonna waste time defending that. That's jacked up, man. Making a human body part of a conversation piece? But it wasn't Napoleon who did it. It was one of his aforementioned savants. Yet Adam blames him.
When images of the findings reached Europe, scholars went cuckoo for these corpses. And over the next century, hundreds of rich Europeans started excavating Egyptian cultural sites like crazy, pilfering thousands of priceless treasures.
Yes, rich people financed archaeological digs, and still do today. Rich people at that time still ruled most of the world. Some may argue that they still do. The rich guy who financed Carter was a dang earl. Lord Dorchester himself. George Herbert. Divestment of power in the British Empire was not yet at its present state. That is to say, the rich dudes Adam says were pilfering Egypt, well, they were the state-sponsored types because they were the state. Which I can't speak too much on, except to say it wasn't like that, according to his own source. There are plenty of Egyptian Egyptologists doing the same thing. They just didn't get the coverage of their European counterparts. His own source lists names: Rafia el-Tahtawi, Ahmed Kamal, and other Egyptians. It wasn't illegal, and still isn't illegal, to go into the desert at your own expense and hire people to dig sand. In fact, it was encouraged. Help pump cash into the local economy. They had to split the fine with the powers that be. They weren't Egyptian. In fact, during Carter's dig in the 20s, Egypt was under the British. But in 1914, it was the Turks. The Turks were the powers that be, and they made everyone divvy up what they found, and they kept their share. In fact, a lot of the time said any undisturbed tomb belonged exclusively to Egypt. Any disturbed tomb, the loot would be split. That'll come up later. When Carter found King Tut's tomb, the British were in charge. Oh, and by the way, nothing from Tut's tomb was taken. It all remained in Egypt. All of it. Carter couldn't take any of it back home. In fact, it's still there today. In an effort to be fair, though, there are claims that Carter stole some items from the dig and smuggled them back home. The problem is that was never proven, and Carter wouldn't say and couldn't admit it even if he did, because then he would have been in violation of the law and it all would have gone back to Egypt. But again, no evidence for that at all. Egypt was not ransacked, despite what Adam is telling you. It was systematically explored and excavated and studied from the time of Napoleon and his savants. They had laws that no stonework could leave Egypt, but all the plaster you wanted could go. They had inspectors. They had a law that an Egyptian official had to be present at any tomb opening. Nobody is saying it wasn't dirty. Big money was involved. Of course it got nasty. Knowledge and shared heritage and good feelings didn't pay for tombs to be found and explored. They had to be worth something, and the benefactors needed a return on their investment. It's naive to think it's any different now. It isn't different now. If you find treasure, you get to keep some. And why shouldn't you? You bore the cost and risk of trying to find it. You deserve to have the reward. Seems fair to me. Next! By the way, it's all like this. Adam is so dishonest. He is so dishonest. Every one of his references doesn't say what he thinks it says. Some contradict the other references, and some say the exact opposite of what Adam thinks they say, which disproves his point. Case in point, this next scene.
It gets worse. Rich Europeans even held mummy parties where they unwrapped the ancient remains as a party game.
Last person to unwrap the mummy has to grind it up and snort it.
See that there? This reference. Let's take a look. Oh, wow. The first paragraph. Let's read it together. If you were looking to have a great night out on February 15th, 1834, Thomas Pettigrew's sold-out event was definitely the place to be. The lucky Londoners who had managed to acquire a ticket for the Royal College of Surgeons that night were looking forward to a rare sensation. Before their eyes, Pettigrew was going to slowly unroll an authentic mummy of the 21st dynasty. For science. See that? It wasn't unrolling in front of a bunch of medical surgeons for science. And apparently Pettigrew was a showman and made some cash, far different than what Adam claims. Did it happen elsewhere? The article says it did, but offered no insight into the motives of the people doing it. But Adam didn't present a balanced view, did he? He just cherry-picked whatever points fit his narrative and went with it, ignoring the context of the piece and using the clickbait title to justify his assertion. It's crap.
Oh, fish sticks! This is very disturbing. But what does it have to do with King Tut?
A lot, actually.
No, nothing really, because, as mentioned, Carter was not able to take his loot out of Egypt. So everything that Adam said has nothing to do with King Tut or Carter. Carter wasn't French. He didn't pillage Egypt. He didn't star in the unrollings. Nothing. Tut's tomb was relatively undisturbed because it was hidden. Grave robbers throughout the centuries had found the others, but not Tut's. Well, there is evidence to support the tomb had been robbed in antiquity. But once Ramesses' tomb builders covered it up, no robbers for millennia. Remember earlier when I said there were laws in place to protect unopened tombs? Well, there were. And any unopened tombs had already been ransacked for anything of value. Not by modern Europeans. There is ample evidence to suggest tomb robbing had been going on since the first time anyone put a ton of wealth into a tomb and buried it. Strangely enough, people thought maybe they should have it instead of some dead dude. The builders of Ramesses VI's tomb, which is above Tut's, for some reason buried the entrance to Tut's tomb when constructing Ramesses. No one knows how or why, but there it is. It was hidden from view, and that's why it was not found. I mean, come on, Adam. The golden coffin alone is worth $13 million. Read the article you referenced. It's in the description too, by the way. The whole load from Tut's tomb is worth $750 million. Which brings us to this next point.
A lot, actually, because this Egyptomania fad led to the excavation of over 30 pharaohs' tombs, except for one, the tomb of Tutankhamun. Tut was so unimportant that his tomb was pretty much ignored by grave robbers.
Let's just forget that this is a judgment from Adam. Let's forget that the importance of a person is completely subjective. Let's forget that. Because Adam, again, is wrong. Just dead wrong. Look at his reference. The title is King Tut, the teen whose death rocked Egypt. Subtitle: Famous for his tomb full of golden treasures, the boy pharaoh was a pivotal figure in shaping the future of Egypt. The article then goes on to tell how important King Tut was, completely contradicting what Adam is saying. Does he even read his own references? I mean, obviously he doesn't. Did you see him on Joe Rogan? He can't support anything he says without a script and writers. And even then, his sources don't support his arguments et al. But hey, he's just an actor, right? Wrong, son! He is peddling a version of history in view of events that is heavily biased. He then uses that bias to try and influence people to his way of thinking, and it's deceptive.
Get him!
And it's deceitful. And I don't like it. As mentioned, Tut's tomb was lost, and Carter had to find it by digging sand away from what had been placed there 3,000 years earlier by the Ramesses construction guys. Last point.
Discovery of the tomb made international headlines, but not because Tut was historically significant, it was because of that ancient Egyptian bling.
Wrong again. Take a look at his own reference. It says that Carter's find was the archaeological find of the 20th century. Is it because of the bling? Well, yeah, kind of. Is it for other stuff? Hell yeah, it is. The bling itself is an amazing find, let's be honest. But the bling itself tells a story. Some are statues, some are votive, just a bunch of stuff that offers much insight into the people who built it. We have learned a lot about Egypt in Tut's time from his tomb. Beyond that, Akhenaten, Tut's father, was one of the most notable pharaohs of all time. He changed everything in Egyptian society, starting and ending with their pantheon. He took away all the power of the temples, their priests, and their gods. Choosing one god he called the Aten, or the sun disk. He even changed his own name from Tutmos, the name of his father, to Akhenaten. Religion and the afterlife was everything to the Egyptians, and old Aki changed it all. Side note, many scholars agree on 1400 BC being the date of the Exodus. Why do you think old Aki, after seeing his grandfather get his ass handed to him by the God of Israel, why do you think he changed the pantheon to a monotheistic one? Interesting, huh? I thought so. Well, consider that, plus Nefertiti was his wife, who had become huge news since her bust discovery in 1912, and then Tut comes along and changes it back to the way it used to be, helping to destroy his father's legacy and Nefertiti's too. He only ruled for a few years. Adam's references says he was still a teenager. I've seen 20 get thrown around, but that's not important. What is that King Tut was a super important figure in Egyptian history. His parents were super important to his history, and they are all interconnected. A son tearing down his father's legacy, in the minds of the people of the Egyptians, destroying their faces and bringing down their likeness doomed their afterlife. We still don't know where Akhenaten is buried. We don't even know if he had a tomb, or if he was even mummified, or how he even died. The boy King Tut played a much bigger role in Egypt than we know, and we can only hint at his importance, thankfully, because of his tomb, which gave us an insight. So from a historical perspective, any tomb with that much of a hoard is important on its face because of its hoard. Can anybody at any time in history say that they were buried with $750 million worth of stuff and not be memorable for the time period at least? Come on. Of course not. That's stupid. And I don't know why Adam had to bring it up. He could have at least been honest, but that would have been out of character. That he thinks you are too stupid or too lazy to research before believing. No, Adam did not ruin Egypt. He ruined his reputation again by publishing verifiably false statements. Thank you for staying this long. I am obviously not talking about you. All of my references in Adam's can be found in the description and are on the money. Adam is not, and he has made a career out of pushing false narratives at the behest of his leftist agenda, and I'm glad his interests intersected with mine and I could rip into how dishonest this guy actually is. Thank you so much for watching.